my favorite patch of the garden where we have this beautiful row of cabbage. This is a Savoy cabbage, so they're the wrinkly kind, both green and red leaf. And what we're going to make from this cabbage is delicious fermented sauerkraut. And we typically do this as a community. We get together and make buckets and buckets full of sauerkraut that then sits for a few weeks while it's fermenting before we then further jar it up for longer term storage. So sauerkraut is a great way to increase your diversity of your microbiome. Again, it's also a great kind of an acrid taste, so it creates salivation and it helps with digestion, and it's really fun and super easy to make. So if you haven't made sauerkraut, definitely try. And why wouldn't you want to plant cabbage? Look at how beautiful these heads are. They're like massive flowering heads of sacred geometry right here smiling at us. Behind them we have an entire row of tomatoes. We have both Roma tomatoes for making sauce, and we also have some slicing tomatoes. We grow them in two different ways. You can see that for the Roma tomatoes, these are determinate tomatoes, which means that they all flush at once and they ripen all at once, so it's called determinate. And we use a series of strings that are kind of woven between these posts in an X fashion so that it holds the plant up as it's growing. So you can see this nylon string, it's very durable and it's woven through here in an X pattern, and it creates a wall of a trellis. Further on down here for the indeterminate tomatoes, indeterminate means that these tomatoes will produce over a longer period of time at different rates, and so we keep them growing on this string. If you want to get an up close of that, it's pretty much a pole on the top. The string goes from the bottom of the earth up to the top. It can be adjusted here through this easily sliding notch on this piece of wood, and basically the plant is then spiraled around this string to give it support. And down here we have the candy of the tomato family, which are these beautiful sun gold tomatoes. They're just coming in to form, and they're these beautiful bunches of golden nectar. This one at this type of color is ready to eat, and we typically fight over these in the garden. The only thing we fight about. Let's see. We have a bunch of dandelion growing here. Dandelion is such a good bitter leaf. It's really easy to grow, and it's a great addition to your salads. It basically adds a little bit of bitterness, which helps us to digest, and also it's a little bit of a diuretic. So again, it's sort of like the parsley, helps cleanse the body. But that bitter flavor is really important to bring back into our diets because it's sort of a flavor that's been lost. The flavor of sweet dominates too much in our general diet, and bringing back things that are acrid and sour and bitter and hot, these are all good things to help increase our digestive juices so that we have better digestion, assimilation, and elimination. Behind us here we have some scarlet runner beans that are producing these beautiful pods that have a beautiful purple or white bean that we'll use later on for stews and bean soups. I love to mix flowers, so we have the end of some yarrow. Yarrow is a beautiful protective plant, spiritual protection. It helps with protection from negativity. It's very good in cleansing, and so it's great to have a piece of yarrow in your garden and cut it and bring it into your room when you need some extra support emotionally. It's a good one for that. Behind us here we have a big patch of sweet potatoes. We have several varieties in here. Some of them date back to 100-year-old generations that have been passed down, especially in North Carolina here, where we've have the right conditions, which sweet potatoes typically like hot and humid, and it's really hot and humid today. As you can see, I'm probably sweating. We've been also growing in this area, which is the center of our garden. This is the most sacred place of our garden. We're growing this yaki sack corn for this is known as ancestral corn. It comes from the lineage of, in Guatemala, Martin Prechtel talks about this type of corn and how the native people use it there. It's to represent birth and death, and so it is a celebratory corn. And this particular corn is being grown for a loved one who was killed in a tragic car accident in January. And we're growing this corn as a way to incorporate the spirit of her back into our lives. And so after this corn is grown, it'll be processed in a way where we all get together in a ceremony and we basically add prayers and intentions to the corn, and then we'll eat it. And it's like bringing back her spirit into our lives to basically further the work that she's doing and continue our connection to this sacred ancestor who's passed on. Hello, beautiful corn. We have more peppers here, some peppers growing. These are hard to grow, I'll be honest. Definitely probably the most challenging crop in the garden is peppers. They like to be very hot and dry. Sometimes we cover them. We're experimenting with what exactly is right. But in the future, we will have a hoop house as a part of this field, which would be a covered place to grow things like cucumbers, peppers, and tomatoes that really like hot and dry conditions. We have some more scarlet runner beans here that the bees are enjoying. And this year they're not producing so many pods, but you know what? We don't mind. It's producing so much beauty. There's so much beauty just by seeing this wall of red flowers in here. So it gives us joy to be here, and so that's its function. And lastly, I draw your attention over to this awesome patch of taro that's being guarded by the ancestor tobacco. We have a small little bit of tobacco that will be used in ceremony as an offering for ancestors, an offering to the prayers that we're sending to the fire. And so tobacco's in the garden here in this sacred spot with this ancestral corn. And my ancestors represented here with this taro. And taro is a plant that usually is grown in the Caribbean and wet places. My ancestry is from St. Martin in the Caribbean, and my mama always made us tanya seed, they call it, in soups and stews with fish particularly. And so this is a root. It basically produces a starchy root that will dig up towards the end of the season when the leaves start turning yellow, and we'll get potato-like size starchy roots that are really delicious. Well, I think that takes us around the tour of our garden. Thank you for joining us, and we'd love to invite you to come to this garden and learn with us and connect with us. You can see more about that on my website. That'll be listed in the link below. Thanks for joining me.